Losing time, I'm fading fast. I just wanna make it last. Try to let go of the past. I close my eyes, embrace the blast. Sleepless nights and headaches stack. Restlessness to hell and back. What's my purpose? What do I grab? A slippery surface, a heart attack. And sometimes you just gotta believe there's something that'll.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. In this particular episode, talking about Chris Watts, it's not scripted. I normally try to compile a script just so that the narrative is tight and concise, but in this particular case I'm not doing that because the theme of this particular episode is who is controlling the narrative, right? And I realize that a lot of people who maybe are new to True Crime Rocket Science, who haven't heard my voice before, who haven't read any of my books, and who maybe aren't even that familiar with Crime Rocket, may say, well, that's just your belief or that's your opinion. A lot of the research I do and a lot of the kind of conclusions I reach aren't simply based on plucking something out of the ether, right? And to illustrate this, I'm going to put the ball in your court and explain how one reaches a conclusion or one reaches kind of consensus about something that everyone should reach. In other words, what I'm saying isn't true crime rocket science, it's what everyone should be well aware of and what everyone should be thinking. And so here's the example. If you Google Chris Watts right now, and I would like you to do it whoever you are, wherever you are in America or in the world, and then just have a look at what the results of that Google search are, right? Now when I Google it, my results are a 6-hour-old story about the auction of a house from Meow, another story about Chris Watts seeing his daughter in prison in a vision, that's also from Meow or meaww.com. That's from 2 days ago. Then there's another story from news.com.au, also from 2 days ago. Those are sort of the top 3 stories, right? Now, I don't think it's news to anybody who's familiar with this case that today's quite a sort of landmark day. You know, it's the first time that a book has been written with the consent of Chris Watts about Chris Watts, right? Now, if you think about the unprecedented discovery, like 1,960 pages of discovery, followed by more discovery, followed by 3 terabytes of video and audio, dumped on the public by the Weld District Attorney and the Weld County. And then, in other words, you get this massive release of information, right? And there was massive publicity surrounding this case. When Nicole Kessinger gave her exclusive to the Denver Post, it was hard to find the end to how and where that story got repeated. It was on CNN, Inside Edition, Radar Online, everywhere. Every potential news outlet that was sort of worth its salt kind of picked up on the story, and it sort of reverberated around news media around the world. And now here we are in just a little bit past the anniversary of the Watts family murders, and now a book comes out and it is giving another version of the Watts story, and there's just silence. I haven't seen anything in the Denver Post, I haven't seen anything in the Coloradoan, I haven't seen anything in local media. and where we have seen coverage of this, it's been in sort of overseas media like the Daily Mail, a tabloid based in the United Kingdom. And yet it's an American author who's spoken to Chris Watts and so on. Now, I'm the first person to say, yes, I understand the story that Chris Watts's versions have not been true. So, the first confession saying that Shanann killed the children wasn't true. Well, yes, but everyone reported on that, right? It was on Dr. Phil, and everybody was sort of discussing that, and that was dealt with and debunked. So that was sort of the first confession, and then you had the second confession effectively in February, and everyone dealt with that again, and it was all over the news. It was on Dr. Phil, and it was sort of national news once again. And all I'm saying is now you have the third release, but this time it's from Chris Watts himself on his own terms, and now you have just silence, right? I'm not coming into this with an agenda of my own, so I'm not coming into this to say, well, everyone should be believing this third version. So I'm not an apologist for Chris Watts. I'm not an antagonist, if that's the word, for Shanann Watts. So I don't have a position that I'm on Chris Watts' side, and I certainly don't have a position that this third confession is true or legitimate either. So as far as I'm concerned, all three confessions are bogus, although we do learn something new in each of them. And that's really the difficulty, is for who to say, well, that part is true and that makes sense. And I've just experienced the difficulty of that with a journalist that I contacted today, and I'll share a little bit more about that in a moment. But what I want to just sort of focus on for a moment is this idea of, so this is yet another version, but now no one's going to interrogate it, except the sort of unofficial YouTubers and the sort of social media mob that are following this case. And it's sort of like, well, why? So I'm going to give you one sample from an email that I received. I'm not going to say who it's from, but as some people are aware, I was contacted by a representative from the Watts family, and they wanted to clear up something that was controversial and leading to gossip and rumors around the possibility that someone was collaborating with, or an accessory, or helping Chris Watts, or just, I don't know whether people think that it was done accidentally or on purpose, but just this whole rumor that someone gave him the oxycodone, and so now there's some third entity once again, which is absolute, like a gold mine for all the conspiracy buffs. Now you can make sort of an endless list of people that could have potentially given it to him, and you can make a YouTube video on each of them. I personally don't put any stake in the whole accessory thing, just as I don't put any stake, and I never did, in the murders taking place at the well site. So let me just be clear on that. In terms of the third confession, I don't think there was a scenario where the children were alive and they were taken to the well site. I don't believe that. I don't think it's a question even of belief. I think it's just logical that didn't happen. And I also don't think that there was this sort of, this is the big explosion with this amongst the people that are following the letters from Christopher thing, that Chris Watts made like he sort of attempted murder on his daughters, and then he had to kill them again. I just don't think that is true at all, and I think there are many reasons to that support why he would say something like that. One of them being he's already committed to those shadows in the driveway thing, so now he's got to he has to stick to the narrative that they died at the well site. But the issue now is that he's lied so often that people are now saying, well, isn't it all lies? And the answer is yes, but not 100% of it is a lie. So I'll give an example. During the first confession, when he said Shanann killed the children, there's a part of that that's true and there's a part that's not true. And before you get upset, the part that's true is that the children were dead, right? So in other words, he was acknowledging through that bogus confession that the children were no longer alive, and he was acknowledging through that confession that he had killed Shanann. And I don't agree with the reason. I think nobody does, that he saw what Shanann did and then he, out of rage, he then killed her. The point that I'm trying to make is in the first confession, what the FBI achieved was to get Chris Watts to admit that all three were dead, and obviously, Shanann being pregnant, Nico, right? So the truth in the first confession was the fact that the three people weren't missing; they were deceased, right? And then what's not true was all the fluff that Watts came up with. And that's what I mean by each confession has an aspect that's, let's say, forensically true, and it's probably a very small minority of what he's saying. But the same applies to the third confession. Now, based on my research, I believe the oxycodone is very relevant, and I didn't come up with oxycodone after the fact. In other words, I didn't hear Watts say it and then suddenly snap my fingers and invent the theory that he used oxycodone as a murder weapon. I presented the scenario that a sedative was used to overdose, to murder his family, in the first book published in September 2018. So what I want to say is I came up with this scenario independent of the discovery, independent of Chris Watts. It was just kind of a gut feel. And through the course of the Two-Face series, I've maintained that I think the overdosing was of the children, and this is different to what he's even saying in this third confession. He's saying that he tried to kill Shanann or induce a miscarriage. I'm not saying that he didn't, but I'm just saying this whole thing that it's oxycodone only on Shanann, I don't think is true. I think he also used oxycodone on his own children, and I believe that's how he actually killed them. So in that sense, I'm not supporting what he's saying. All I'm saying is I think one should give what he's saying in this last confession, even though it's not really a confession, one should also analyze it and then see where things go. But to me, it's very odd that the American media just seem to be silent, and you've got this sort of, you've got to now go to British media and Australian media and so on to get media that are talking about this, and as Scott Reich says, it's the first time that you've had Chris Watts speaking voluntarily to someone. And even when he made this statement saying that he got the oxycodone, he didn't get it from someone else, that was also voluntarily, although I think he was asked to be clear about that. What I don't like about that statement, I've sort of gone back and looked at it, is nowhere does he actually say the words Oxycontin or oxycodone. You can hear that it sounds like he's talking about it, because he says, I got it from the medicine bin, and he says I got it from home and I took it on the plane and I used it on either the July the 30th or July 31st. So it sounds very much like he's talking about that, but Unfortunately, he never actually says the word oxycodone or Oxycontin. So that's too bad. I have asked for more information, so we'll see if that happens. I'm not contesting what he's saying. I believe that it's true that he did get the oxycodone where he got it from. So I'm not contesting that. I also think it's a little bit funny that people are saying you can't induce a miscarriage from it, and also, this big mystery of how it got into the house. Well, oxycodone is a common, absolutely classic pain-killing medication used by lupus sufferers. That's something you can also Google as well. Don't take my word for it. Go and Google the symptoms of it. I know people also say, and this is also something a journalist said to me today, like trying to shut down the whole line of conversation. Don't you know what's in the autopsy report? Of course I know what's in the autopsy report. Don't you know that the autopsy report refers to there's no sign of oxycodone, right? And well, there's quite a lot to say about that, but let's stick to my version of events, that I believe the children were overdosed with the oxycodone. Why would you not see that in their autopsies? Well, the answer being, if oil can literally dissolve human tissue, you're telling me that it's not going to break down fragile chemical compounds. And oxycodone is something that has a rapid half-life. It's rapidly absorbed by the body, and then it's rapidly broken down. It's something like a matter of a few hours. In some cases 3 hours, 6 hours, whatever. And so, obviously, if you suspend, if you put a body that's been exposed to this in hot oil for 4 days, 4 entire days, and then you flush out the liquid, and the liquid is then sequestrated and carried away in a truck, and that liquid, even if you could keep that liquid and test it, I don't think you'd have a hope in hell in finding even minute traces of it. It would simply be dissolved and destroyed and disappeared. So that's my reasoning. There is another sort of aspect to deal with, which is Watts' own version, that he actually gave the oxycodone to. He's got a couple of versions. The one is that he gave it to her to induce a miscarriage, which I believe, and I believe he did it not once but probably several times, probably even before she went to Arizona. In other words, because she was ill then as well. All I'm saying is it was likely more than once, and that could have been a second instance. And then he actually mentions that, something about oxycodone being found in the coroner's report. Well, not to our knowledge, but maybe he knows something about it that we don't know. The problem is, I don't think the oxycodone has got anything to do with Shanann's murder. It's got something to do with trying to induce the miscarriage and then failing. I do think it has something to do with the children's murder, even though I can't necessarily prove it. But the absence of evidence isn't necessarily proof that something didn't happen. And I've got very strong reasons for believing that would be his preferred method of murder of his children, just as I don't think he would permit a confrontation with Shanann when he was doing everything to avoid a confrontation with her. And in terms of this, I would recommend that listeners go to the crimerocket2.com and just go through the 1 year ago today, I think it's CW, that hashtag, and just sort of look through the timeline of how Chris Watts on a daily basis deals with avoiding Shanann and trying to just shut down and sort of get himself off the hook of confronting her suspicion that he's having an affair. So this idea that on the day of the murders that he would suddenly want to have a conversation and sort of play his open cards, he didn't want to admit the affair. That's why the murder happened. So there's no way he's going to allow her to come into the house and have the opportunity to confront him about that credit card charge and ask him everything that she's afraid of, but you need a long time to make this point in a clear way that's referencing the semantics and the discovery and so on. I'm not going to do that here, but what I do want to do here is I just want to talk about the media and how, to me, sinister they are, and how kind of suspicious it is that they're not covering this. And Scott Reich made mention that the sheer volume of discovery released in this case was gargantuan. I mean, it was colossal. It's unprecedented. You've never seen like such a big release of data. But it was like such a deluge that it was almost like looking for a tiny little goldfish in a sort of a Niagara Falls of data. And so someone had to sort of sift through all the discovery, and a lot of it was boring and meaningless. And then you had things like the search for the Oxycontin 80 milligrams, which is potentially a murder weapon, and then the discovery says nothing about that, right? And then the media say nothing about that either. It's just, for me, strange. It's either the media are very dumb, or the media are very lazy, or the media have kind of an agenda. The media have agreed not to, almost in like a collusion, have agreed not to deal with the what's narrative on its own terms. I don't know whether it's because oxycodone is part of the opioid epidemic and the other court cases surrounding that and powerful interests. I don't know if that's what's going on. I don't want to be too conspiracy theory about it, but that's the one aspect. And then the other one is, when the actual feedback I've got from journalists that I've contacted, just to say, Chris Watts has said this from prison. What do you think, and don't you want to talk about it? And so the one message, I'm not going to say it's from, said, in response to my email, thanks Nick, I sent the XYZ to blah blah, I'm not going to say who that is, and then she says, I don't think they're into moving this forward. What's the story just keeps getting worse. There's not a whole lot of sympathy for him out there, and then a sign off. So this person basically just admits that there's no interest anymore in what's a story. I don't know whether that is just normal sort of lethargy, or what do you call it, fatigue from the media. I wouldn't think so. I mean, I think everyone knows that people are interested in the Chris Watts case. So the fact that the media would sort of turn up their nose at Watts, literally, it's his own words coming out of jail, just seems a bit strange to me. And if you're going to make the criticism that nothing he says is true, why not say that about the second confession? And we had an interesting article covering that, where the district attorney said, we think this is a credible version and we think it's mostly accurate. And this was a version that was about no premeditation, that he just snapped and that everything he did was sort of spontaneous, that he felt rage. The version that we're getting now is about, we admits to thinking about murdering Shanann for weeks. So now we're back to a premeditated scenario, and I've always believed it was a premeditated scenario. A lot of people said they don't, because it was dumbly executed, and all sorts of silly mistakes like the leaving the phone at the home and the purse and the sheet and all sorts of things. But that can also be explained by sleep deprivation and not having enough time and just slipping up. In any event, that's something new that the third version does acknowledge, which is premeditation. And I think everyone will agree, and I mean the court also agrees, that premeditation is much worse than any other kind of crime. So as soon as you attach something after deliberation, it's a far more severe crime with a far more severe punishment. And that's exactly what was accused of and what he was charged with. I mean, that's what he agreed with in the plea deal, which is why in the second confession, this whole idea that it now changes to it's not premeditated, but the district attorney agrees with that, doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can see the premeditation in so many aspects, like the secret calculator app, and how he arranges access to the well site on Sunday night, and even the fact that he's listening to is on a 111-minute conversation with Nicole Kessinger on August 12th on Sunday night, and the television's on loudly, and then where are the children? Were they unconscious? Was that attempted murder already committed then, or were they already dead? And so this whole idea of premeditated murder, if you just take the idea of 3 strangulations in a row, each one lasting about 3 minutes or 5 minutes, then as soon as you go after one strangulation, then you've already got premeditated murder, because you are now continuing this process. Even a single murder that involves smothering or strangulation involves 3 to 5 minutes, where for 3 to 5 minutes you are committed to what you're doing, right? So if you just think about it in a logical way, any murder where there's strangulation isn't just a spontaneous crime. You need to be sticking to what you want to do for 3 full minutes. 3 minutes isn't just a number. 3 minutes is a long time. It's 3 times 60 seconds at least, and someone is struggling under your hands, and you are preventing them from succeeding. You're preventing them from getting out of your grip. So there's real intent there, and it's deliberate. And deliberate means you've made a decision to do what you're going to do, and then you finish doing what you're doing, and then you do it again. I don't understand how people can't see that as premeditation. Even in a scenario where the entire crime, in other words, if you forget about the pre-planning, if the entire crime took place in terms of three strangulations, that's premeditated. But true crime rocket science is all about how you link the premeditation to the post-meditation, and then everything that happened in the crime. So the fact that he called the realtor almost immediately after burying his family and called the school, that doesn't show someone who's shocked at what they've done, or doesn't realize what they've done. It shows someone who's simply planned what they wanted to do, did it, planned with the disposal, did that, and then went on with their day as per normal. And the fact that his colleagues didn't notice anything untoward tells you he's trying to behave. He's trying to have the crime appear invisible. That's all what the Sermon on the Porch is all about, and everything else. So people do seem to have fallen for Chris Watts, for his lies. People say it's absurd. You can't believe anything that he says, but the real test is not knowing that he lies, but knowing what the truth is, given all the deceit. And nobody seems to know about that or care about that. Everyone seems to, as soon as there's another version, everyone jumps onto that version. That's now the latest version. What about the knowledge we've accumulated over the first version and the second? What about all the knowledge we've got from the discovery? And just to address this, and this is something I mentioned to another journalist who was sort of mockingly saying to me, do I know what was in the autopsy reports? And I sort of said, do you know do you know about Crime Rocket? Like, do you know what Crime Rocket's about? Yes, yes, yes. Um, the Crime Rocket was one of the first to publish the autopsy reports, and the autopsy reports are probably one of the most visited posts on Crime Rocket. Um, so yeah, I am aware of what was in the autopsy reports, and um, when I mentioned to the journalist, that are you aware that um, a reference to petechial hemorrhage comes up 11 times, all of them to say there were no petechial hemorrhages, right? So in other words, petechial hemorrhage is a classic symptom of when you have manual strangulation. And so what happens is those little vessels, capillaries, burst either in the face or in the eyes, right? And then if you go to the autopsy, and what you see is by every single reference, it's to say there are no petechial hemorrhages. In other words, Shanann Watts, no petechial hemorrhages. Bella Watts, no petechial hemorrhages. CC, no petechial hemorrhages. Now, with Shanann, what doesn't make sense is Watts is admitted to strangling her, so why isn't that there? And that's where I think you do need true crime rocket science. I'm not going to go into that here. In the instance of Bella and Cece, you can argue that it's not there because it's destroyed. You wouldn't be able to see that evidence anyway. That's possible, I'm going to admit that. But then I also wonder why the autopsy would state that. Why would the autopsy state that there's no petechial hemorrhage? So it's also possible that sort of fairly fine rupture to fragile structures could have been destroyed by chemicals that destroy tissue. So that definitely is an argument. But the fact that Watts has been saying that he smothered them, and just the way that it's not very convincing, the way that he talks about it. First of all, it happening at the well site. Second of all, that there's no screaming from either of the children, and there doesn't seem to be much struggling either. In fact, no one seems to struggle. Shanann doesn't seem to struggle, and neither do the children. I don't put much stake in the strangling, especially of the children. So if you take what I've just said here, isn't it an important aspect to address what did actually happen with this case? If you're going to spend so much time writing about is the house being sold, and then you sort of go in Dr. Phil and you examine the body language, and you deal with the Ruseks who have been through so much trauma, and you put them on television, you say, can you please stop talking about this case, please stop. You put that qualifies for the media, right? It just sort of seems like there are certain interests that are deciding what's news and what isn't, and it seems like this case was basically shut down when someone wanted it shut down. In other words, it was shut down from going to trial, but now it's shut out of the media narrative as well. And I just find that curious. You could argue that it's not shut down and that this isn't news. And I would argue that it is. I would argue that something that Watts himself has said constitutes another version, and you can at least say, well, it's not credible, or you can say, well, and this is my point, the oxycodone does seem relevant. I mean, it was in the house, it is in the discovery, and it's a very credible murder weapon. I mean, I think it's 130 plus people die in America every day from opiate overdoses, using these medications, abusing them. So it's almost a obvious murder weapon. Now I want to compare this to Casey Anthony, who Googled, or the whole mythos around that case, where somebody Googled chloroform and then it was chlorophyll and whatnot, and the whole idea of homemade, I think it was homemade murder weapons or something. In a situation like that, where you want to, or potentially want to, get rid of a family member, where you're going to get a murder weapon, and then the question then comes up: is it homemade? Where can you make a murder weapon out of household products? And in the Casey Anthony case, if you go through the literature, there is some online artifacts to show that you can make chloroform out of ordinary household products like bleach and ammonia and whatnot. You can Google that as well. But the whole point being, you don't need to go and buy some kind of weapon. It's something that one can use in the home. So why wouldn't that apply possibly in the Watts case? And that's been a thing that hasn't been clear throughout the whole Watts case, is what was the murder weapon? If it was the blankets, where are the blankets? If it was the blankets, where are the fibers in the lungs of the children? Do you get what I'm getting at? So it just seems like this case has been closed, but there's no closure, and as a result, you're getting this endless conjecture, and I don't think it's really helping. I don't think social media is going to solve this case. I don't think YouTubers are going to solve this case, and it's difficult because, as I say, when I contacted a journalist from quite a well-known website covering true crime, who's actively covered the Watts case, the journalist attacks me to say, well, surely, why would what Watts is saying here be true or not? But that's not the point. The point is that someone felt so strongly about this that Watts consented to recording what he felt about this particular aspect, oxycodone, so that rumors could be neutralized, right? That's not really the point. Isn't what Watts is trying to do, or that the point is, from my perspective, is Watts went to the effort to literally allow himself to be recorded, and isn't that newsworthy? And so for someone to say it's not, and then also, which is interesting, when I provided the information to the journalist, they did what a lot of other people have also did. They simply said that it's not true, right? And then I said, well, first of all, you can listen to the audio, which the journalist hadn't done either. And then I said, well, you can track the narrative where it's in the media, where the author of the book says that Watt said he would take this knowledge of oxycodone to the grave, and now he's made a U-turn on that really big statement. Like, it's a really strong statement to make. And then you say, oh, is that not important? Is that not, we're not going to think about that, we're not going to talk about that. And then what was quite interesting was it then became about my credibility. And I just find that pretty crazy. I've been blogging about this case for a really long time, and I've got quite a strong sort of protocol in terms of conspiracy theories. I don't have a very high tolerance for it. The whole shadows on the driveway is incredibly irritating, and I've only dealt with it because there was a sort of a nod to it. There was sort of an acknowledgement to it, and because of that I felt like I had to debunk it. And it's literally a line, a little shadow that is a little line that appears on the driveway for 1 second once, that people conjure into a child running around, and you say, is the child wearing shoes? No. Is it a boy or a girl? I don't know. Is it Bella or Celeste? I don't know. Is the child, what clothes is the child wearing? What hair do you see? And the answer to all of that is, I don't know. And then the actual situation is, you're dealing with a tiny fragment, a tiny little triangle in the corner of a video, and this line that you see is a tiny little line in that tiny fragment as Watts bends down. And they're saying, well, that couldn't be his arms, it's someone running towards him. I've got a image of Shanann where she's walking into the doorbell, the Ring doorbell footage, and there are 3 or 4 different shadows at her feet. Does that mean there were sort of ghosts walking around, or that there were 3 or 4 Shananns, because the shadows sort of crisscrossing each other? No, I mean literally, you've got a photo of Shanann with like a star, a shadow like in a star that's sort of rotating around her feet. Does that mean there were sort of some kind of poltergeist in Shanann? I mean, and the answer is pretty obvious. It's because you had several light sources, and Shanann is now moving, and so the light sources change. The point being, with this shadow on the driveway, the line on the driveway, the point is, it's one little line that you see once, and you don't actually see what's making the shadow. You don't see little feet, you don't see clothing, you don't see shoes, you don't see hands, you don't see a head bobbing at the top of the pickup truck, you don't see someone running into the side between the garage and the pickup truck, you don't see anyone else running around at any other point. In other words, they're 2 children, but you only see one little line once, and that is conjured into this sort of this incredible narrative. And I don't know, has the world gone mad? You can take anything like that and then conjure anything you want out of it. So in on this point, the journalist sort of kind of attacked me and said, but obviously, are you saying that the children weren't killed at the well site? Yes, that is what I'm saying. And then then it becomes about my credibility, and I sort of feel like I'm dealing with a journalist that I've now got to educate on all this stuff, because I've been following the case throughout, and yet the journalist thinks that she has the superior wisdom, that she knows better. Meanwhile, I had to tell her about the Oxycontin thing because she didn't even know about it. I had to tell her that there had been all this sort of rumors going around. She wasn't even aware of it. She wasn't even aware that people were accusing all sorts of people about being accessories. And in other words, she isn't even keeping track on the Watts case. She's got to rely on emails coming to her or whatever. And look, at the end of the day, I basically said she wanted me to give information, on what day did the family representative contact me by email, and gave her the date. Can I send her proof of the emails? I said I could. And then eventually I just stopped and I said, I don't know why I'm giving you this, because you give me absolutely no credibility. And the fact that you don't know these things, what does that say about your credibility? And then the journalist made a lot of really rude remarks, like, she doesn't know me, I don't know her. She claimed that she'd been on Crime Rocket before, but also claimed that she didn't know I'd written any books about it. Now, anyone who's been on Crime Rocket knows that the right-hand margin has got the books that I've written. I don't know how you can possibly know anything about the Watts case and not see on a hashtag some promoting of my work. How could you miss that? So, yeah, I don't know if I believe this particular person, but I eventually said, look, I don't think you respect my work. I don't think you know enough about the Watts case to know what I'm telling you. And so and then she said, that I just wasted an hour of her time. It was actually half an hour, but the reality is that she wasted half an hour of my time. The result is that she hasn't written anything, and with respect, I think it's out of ignorance and laziness. And I don't know, it's frustrating. So what I want to ask you guys is if you know of any journalists that care about the truth, wherever you are in the world, whether it's Australia, the UK, and you know of some sort of independent journalists that want to have a serious conversation about this case, maybe you can contact me and give me their details. I just find this, it seems like there's an embargo on basically closing the case, but with the truth. It's been left with a second confession which really isn't true. Even what's got the words wrong, the last words of Bella, he got wrong. He basically, in the one version he said she said daddy no, and in another version it's no daddy. I mean, which one is it? So yeah, I mean, so I think we need to legitimize the proper narrative, and let's do that properly, and maybe you guys can help with that. And anyone who disagrees with what I say, just do your own research. Don't take my word for it. If I say that Oxycontin is a classic lupus medication, Google it. Google that and check it out. If you think what I'm saying about the media not covering this is my opinion or it's just not true, Google Chris Watts right now and look at what appears in the media. And just ask yourself, just use your own intelligence, just think for yourself and say, this is a simple thing. A book has come out about Chris Watts, irrespective of whether it's true or the circumstances of it or anything. It's somebody who killed his whole family, and now his story is coming out, and it doesn't matter who is writing it, it doesn't matter any of that stuff. But why is no one talking about it in the media? Why is this insignificant? And I'm simply saying, you could simply say, well, a book came out today, blah, blah, blah. Why has that not happened? I find that suspicious. What about you?
But understand that at this point, I still can't answer questions about the facts surrounding the investigation.
Really all everyone wanted throughout was justice for Shanann and Bella and Celeste. We're certainly pleased this seems to be the outcome.
I think all of those who were involved never truly believed that he would give us an accurate statement. What I can tell you most affirmatively today by what happened in the courtroom is the spotlight that he tried to shine on Shanann falsely, incorrectly, and frankly a flat-out lie is the spotlight that he tried to shine on Shanann falsely, incorrectly, and frankly a flat-out lie
I didn't know what else to do. And he's so disgusting. I'm so ashamed of him. Why? Oh, why? How? I don't even understand how you could bring yourself to do that. Somebody was like,
There was a shocking deal news of the week. Occidental increasing its bid for Anadarko to $76 a share.